Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We examine what's going on around the world, around the states, right here in the city of Kalamazoo from a deft lefty perspective. Do some of that hard-hitting analysis. And in general, we call out the establishment on its BS. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, it's an intense week. We are coming up on 1 week from the municipal elections here in the city of Kalamazoo. It's probably the most competitive election season I have seen in my years covering this stuff. This has I've been observing them for about 32 years. I'd say actively covering for about the last 5. But yeah, there's 8 candidates running for city commission. There's 5 running for mayor. We've had a couple of them on the show already. I believe Esteban might be joining us later tonight. And if so, we will be bringing you that. And then David Benak was on our show last week. Just again, full disclosure, who came on, who didn't, who declined, what reason, etc. So David Anderson was originally going to be on our show. He told us he would reschedule. Rescheduling did not necessarily occur. Jean Hess was going to be on our show. She ended up having to go out of town. I think it might have been her birthday. I'm thinking about it. Emily Demarest declined to be on our program. Benjamin Stanley was going to set up an interview that never seemed to materialize. Chris Pradell was on our show about 2 weeks ago, and if you want to hear that interview, you can look it up. Again, that's 2 weeks before today. You can find that episode on YouTube. Listen to our interview with Chris Pradell, candidate running for City Commission. Jake Andrews and Patrice Griffin also indicated they were interested, but never ended up setting up times with us. David Benak, mayoral candidate, was on last week. And Rob Martinez, another mayoral candidate, was on the week before that. I want to thank everybody all the candidates who took time to come onto the show. Really appreciate you. My listeners definitely appreciate you too for coming on the show to, basically talk about the issues, talk about why you're running. Again, a lot of the forums and all that kind of stuff, you can only really go skin deep into a lot of these issues. It was nice to really be able to sit down with these folks and do more of a deep dive. So I want to introduce, we've actually got a staff member with the Western Herald. I'll just go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Say hello to all the folks out there in Radio Land, if you would. Okay.
Hi, my name is Aya. I'm a staff reporter with the Western Herald. So, glad to be on here.
Well, thank you, because, me and Lawrence are in our, early 20s, late 20s, early 30s. We're like those decrepit old millennials who are, cynical about everything. Anyway. Sorry, I got distracted. Somebody sent me a picture of a tutu. Anyway. It's part of my Halloween costume, by the way. Everybody, happy Halloween. Don't push yourselves too hard out there this weekend. Again, you gotta be ready to vote by next Tuesday. So don't party too hard. Anyway, I thought, again, we've got a lot to talk about. We're gonna deep dive into all of the local candidates, and particular something me and Lawrence always talk about on the show. Talk is cheap. Follow the money. See where the money's coming from, and everybody's campaign finance reports dropped. So we're gonna take a close inspection on all of those. But first, let's talk about some national news, and this is some good news, which is so rare nowadays. So, felt we were compelled that we should talk about it a little bit. Obviously there's a lot of different outlets that are reporting on this. We're reading right now, this is the New York Times, talking about how the Alabama abortion ban is temporarily blocked by a federal judge. And I'm going to read a little bit from the article, and then I'd like to kind of dig in, some commentary, some context. Especially, this relates a lot to, of course, it wasn't just Alabama. This is kind of a coordinated attack on reproductive and women's rights about a year ago. But I'm going to read a little bit from the article, and then we'll dive into some discussion. So, a federal judge on Tuesday blocked a near-total ban on abortions from taking effect next month in Alabama, ensuring the procedure remains legal and available in the state while the case winds its way through the courts. In a ruling against the Alabama law, the most far-reaching anti-abortion measure passed by state lawmakers this year, Judge Myron H. Thompson of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Alabama wrote that it violates Supreme Court precedent and defies the Constitution. Alabama was among several states to approve restrictive laws designed to provoke a renewed legal battle over abortion rights, with the aim to reach the United States Supreme Court and topple Roe v. Wade, which again has been kind of a strategic goal for kind of the GOP and their kind of evangelical alliance for quite some time. Anyway. Federal judges in 6 other states have blocked laws that would ban abortions after what becomes the fetus's heartbeat can be detected from going into effect. And judges in 2 other states have temporarily blocked laws that would ban abortions after 18 weeks. Alabama's law would have gone into effect November 15th. Tuesday's ruling was anticipated. When she signed the bill into law in May, Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey conceded that the legislation was likely unenforceable. Still, she said it would prompt courts to revisit this important matter. So, it's kind of the inverse of what sometimes, left-wing activists will do is, bring something to a court challenge in order to bring it up to broader discussion. In this case, there's a very strategic reason, a lot of people talk about the damage of the Trump administration, and some people will say in the long run, one of the most destructive things that he's done that really a lot of people aren't paying a lot of attention to is the fact that he's court packing a lot of these, D.C. district courts with people who are amenable to the conservative agenda and particularly who are open to the idea of overturning Roe v. Wade. So, I guess I'll pause here. As the resident cis man in the room, I don't necessarily have a one-to-one personal stake. Of course, that's something I'm outraged about. But let me ask you, especially you're a bit younger than I am. Gen Z versus crusty old millennial. Especially, coming into this as a younger person, seeing this very retrograde attack on reproductive rights, how do you feel about, one, this kind of, it's hard to call it a victory because it really is just, keeping our current precedents. It's like playing defense, I suppose, would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a victory, even though it is kind of delaying what would essentially be like a very bad thing to go down in Alabama. And then, I might not personally agree with getting abortions, and I don't know if I would get one if I came into that situation, but I think it's important to look at the bigger picture and then what women are thinking when they go through situations like this. And then every person has the right to make that choice for themselves. And then if you think about what would happen if they weren't able to get that abortion, then we have the child welfare system, foster care, which is already really overcapacitated. And then you just have to think about how life would be for those kids if those pregnancies were to come to term, and then whether those women can take care of them. And then at the end of the day, that's just not something that I or you or any lawmaker has the right to do for someone else.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. And I think, a lot of people who really buy into the whole talking point about, we're saving the children, we're saving the babies, etc. I think we got to really look, the way a lot of these laws are designed are really, they enforce, they criminalize women a lot of the time for things that are beyond their control. There a lot of these really retrograde laws would like punish women for not, carrying miscarriages to term. They would, basically make it felonious to assist somebody in getting an abortion in another state. And, especially, the dimension to it in places like Alabama, it ties also into a lot of these kind of voter suppression schemes, when you're criminalizing, women for things that, and especially if you follow the letter of the law, like even like unintentional miscarriages, there's it's written in the law that like this can happen sometimes, a woman is not aware she's pregnant, and, but anyway, I mean, I guess I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think there's something that's left out of the conversation is like these laws are primarily designed to disenfranchise, women, particularly like the way they were originally designed. I'm thinking like back in the 70s when this was kind of tumbling through the GOP think tanks. There was a definite strategy here to consolidate power more than anything else being prioritized.
Right, 100%. I haven't gone in and kind of looked at the details of it and how that works out, but I think it's definitely a way to kind of take power in a situation where you don't need to take power, and then where you shouldn't be interfering with something that's a medical decision. And even when it comes to taking funding away from Planned Parenthood and organizations like that, like they do a lot more than just provide abortions, and they play a very pivotal role in communities, especially low-income communities, where you can't necessarily go and pay for a doctor that can help you with all of personal care on a level like that. So.
Oh yeah, and especially like I think a lot of right-wingers will invoke Planned Parenthood like some sort of boogeyman, but you actually look at the work they do. They actually, if your whole thing was to like prevent abortions, that was the main thing you were concerned about. Planned Parenthood does that work a lot more effectively than just about any, like the data shows. Their programs to make sure that there's access to prophylactics. Whether you're talking about condoms, IUDs, etc. The work they do, like educating their communities and being that resource,
right,
actively prevents pregnancies from happening. That's something that is always left out of the discussion when people are talking about, abortion access. Just like you go, at time and time again, we see, the right-wing solution is always like abstinence-only programs, and it's kind of, not only is it a bit naive, but it's been proven time and time again by the data that it just doesn't work.
Yeah, at the end of the day, sometimes it just makes me laugh because it's just hypocritical. Like, although you may want your children and other children to stay abstinent and not get out there and get into those types of sexual relationships, you can't prevent that. And you especially can't prevent that if you're not giving teenagers the education that they need to kind of know what to do in those types of relationships and what's important and what decisions to make.
All right, I'm going to say any final thoughts. I'm going to go let Lawrence in, and then I think we'll probably switch gears after that. Or you know what, I'm just going to turn up this funk music. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot like that.
Oh, no, it's okay.
All right, we're back. Now, a wild Lawrence has appeared.
What up, though?
Yeah. So again, we were just talking about the recent the recent stalemate against the assault on reproductive rights. So abortion is legal in all 50 states still, despite the effort last I believe it was last spring or last winter or last spring. by a whole array of states to just basically they were trying to trigger a Supreme Court case to challenge the legality of abortion. Any thoughts on this, Lawrence? I know you just got in.
Man, turn me up in the headphones. Turn me up. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, one of the things main thing, men should not be in control over women's bodies. I think that it is a complete and utter disgrace that we have things like trap laws in this country that make it harder for a woman to go through a process that's legal and something that's already traumatic and something that's already difficult. I think that it's disgraceful that we are putting that as a country that's supposed to be a secular country, we're putting it's still some vernacular from the right wing, Judeo-Christian values, and we are enforcing them on people who otherwise may not believe or may not even subscribe to that type of ideology, and we're also at the same time making it much more difficult for a safe situation for someone to go through that process, because it's not going to stop people from doing so. Women are still going to seek abortions, except that more women will die in the process. So we're causing more harm than allowing people to have the freedom to make the choice for themselves. And one of the other things that I want to advocate for, this is another reason, 5,600 for why we need Medicare for all, because if we have Medicare for all, we won't have a situation where we have to debate the legality of abortion rights, because it's already written in the law that women can have this procedure, and it wouldn't be a problem. Also, forgetting the fact that if you are a Christian and you believe that the Bible is against abortions, the God is also in Numbers 5 is pro-abortions. If you actually read the Bible.
I was going to bring that up, but Lawrence is probably a better scholar than I am. My dad mostly focused on the Book of Revelation, so I know that one pretty well.
Look, if we're gonna keep subscribing to the Old Testament, Numbers chapter 5, I think verses 11 through 31. Verses, yeah. God tells Moses that if a man believes that a woman has cheated on them, take her to the temple. The priest will give her I'm paraphrasing. The priest will give her a concoction. If she has been unfaithful, then her womb will swell and she will miscarry. So you're gonna take it. So outside the fact that you're forcing a woman to do something that she may not want to do, but if a woman is if they feel like the woman's been unfaithful, take them to a place, give them a substance, and then they will miscarry. And God said that's okay. If you don't believe that, or you think God does not hate children, have you ever read the Passover? Oh. You know what I'm saying? What do you think happened to the firstborn children during Passover? Like the firstborn children of Egypt during Passover. I don't think they got hugs and rainbows. Nah, God was that's not how that works. That's not what happened. So the other issue is this. Let's say that let's knock on wood, because I hope that this doesn't happen, that for some reason that restricting the access to abortions does go through. Okay, since there's more women than men in the country, can women say restricting access to Viagra or restricting access to what's the procedure where men get their
vasectomy.
Yeah, if vasectomies and Viagra is restricted to men, are we going to do the same thing that we're doing to women? Are we going to do to men? If abortion is illegal, you know what I'm saying, or that's the framework that you're standing by, then that means every time a man has a wet dream or every time a man is masturbating, he's killing kids. Like if we're going by that same standard. So
I think there's a Monty Python song about that.
You know what I'm saying? So like if we're using that same level of logic, but it's never applied on the other side. So for me, it's ridiculous. Stop trying to regulate someone else's body and stop trying to tell people what they can and cannot do with their body. If you want to prevent more abortions, then we need to put more education into prevention, more education into peer prevention programs, more interventions into sex positive programs, teaching kids how to use condoms, teaching kids about, not kids, but like teenagers, about birth control and safe sex, consent, making sure that, you know, Plan B and other things are available if it does go happen, making sure that it's a safe process so the woman doesn't die. And can we stop demonizing women for even choosing to do it?
I will say too, America still has that very puritanical thing, you know, like I'm just thinking of different cultures popping off the top of my head, you know, whether you're talking about Europe, Latin America, Africa, Scandinavia. Generally, like, people, they start having conversations with their
Africa's a continent, by the way, not a country. Well, I know what you mean. I know what you mean, though.
Europe is
Yeah. But, I know what you mean.
Yeah. But just thinking, like, predominantly culturally, where you don't have a lot of these, you know, white patriarchal norms in play, people start talking to their offspring about sex a lot earlier, and that's typically a lot healthier for people's development, you know. Right. It's good to know about this stuff.
Like, dog, like, and also we fetishize sex so much in our society, and then we get mad when people do it. Like, how many arguments, how many times have you seen people lose their stuff over someone else's experience or ideas when it comes to sex or expressing themselves? Because just like gender, sexuality is on a spectrum. Like, Black Twitter was on fire because of what Tank said the other week, and people was snapping. You know what I'm saying? It was slapping on Twitter. Like, people was going in, but at the same time, I'm like, all right, this is funny. You know what I'm saying? What Tank said was a little crazy. It is funny, but we're getting all up in arms about this, and we're forgetting the fact that Flint still ain't got no clean drinking water. So let's focus on what really matters, even though that is funny. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I mean, like, but to get back to the main point, no, man, men. When it comes to, if we're talking about choice, and we always talk about freedom and choice, if we have Medicare for all, you're giving people freedom and choice on if they want to go through with the procedure or not. If they want to, that's cool. If they don't, then they won't. But they won't go medically bankrupt if they do so. So come on, son, get out of here.
All right. Hey, you got any other thoughts? I think it's about 6:30, so we should probably go to break real quick. But want to make sure that everybody's the topic has been thoroughly discussed before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything that hasn't been said. I just think we live in a really hypocritical society, and we need to get away from that. Like, at the end of the day, we're not going to accomplish anything positive with what we're doing now. So we need to have comprehensive discussions about many issues, not just abortion, but sex and abortion is definitely a big one.
Well, strongly agree. Let's go ahead and go to break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR Kalamazoo.
You're listening to 89.1
WIDR Kalamazoo.
Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Hello, everyone. We are back. This is a Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
Oh, we also got to talk about
As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be.
Oh, yeah, I have some.
How long is it?
It's like 30 minutes, but we can play a small clip of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, so we've got some really cool stuff coming up on the show. I'm gonna leave one as a surprise because we'll talk about it going in the next hour. But that's gonna be a really big national thing.
Yeah.
First, let's reel it back. Yeah, like I said at the top of the show, we got a local election coming up.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so what we've done, Lawrence I think has a little something he wants to talk about. But before that, we got some receipts. Campaign finance reports come out. So I'm gonna let Lawrence touch on a street level issue, and then let's go dig through some of these receipts and see as Killer Mike said, who really fund this man who said he fund this. So
all right, now we okay, so on some street level stuff that recently happened to me earlier today. I posted about this on my Facebook page, and I want to talk directly to the Dave Anderson campaign because I am a Northside resident, and this happened to me, and it happened to a couple other Northside residents that I've been in communication with. Dear Dave Anderson's campaign, we on the North Side who have yard signs of different candidates who's running for mayor and running for city commission do not appreciate you stealing other people's yard signs.
Oh, that's an accusation.
And or putting up your yard signs without talking to the homeowners at the house.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
So
I've heard about this happening quite a bit.
That is disrespectful. And it is wrong. And if anybody from the Dave Anderson campaign would like to have a conversation about how some people's yard signs magically disappeared while yours magically grew out of the ground, we can have that conversation.
Okay. It sounds like you got some corroboration there. So.
Well, in my message, I'm not gonna call out the names of the people who else hit me up, but. In my yard on the north side, we had multiple signs. I have full disclosure. We have your sign in my yard. Emily's sign was in my yard. Patrice's sign was in my yard. If I can get Jacob Andrews, I will put his sign in my yard too, because I like all four of you, even though three of you will only get to see. And I had a David Benak sign also in my yard as well. Well, when I got up earlier today, after a very long night of working, because I work third shift, I get up in the afternoon and David's sign's gone, but David Benak's sign is gone, but Mr. Andrews' sign is in my yard.
Mr. Anderson, you said.
Mr. Anderson's sign is in my yard, and the David Benak sign that I had was gone.
Okay, so this is like firsthand. You literally had a Benak sign, and it got swapped out with an Anderson sign.
Not only did it get swapped out, there was 2 Anderson signs. I only had 1 David Benak sign. So the thing, so from personal experience, and again, I know it's anecdotal experience. I know it's anecdotal evidence. I do not believe that it's. I don't believe it's running rampant. But when I talked about it to a couple different people that live around my neighborhood, and they said, yeah, this happened to them as well. That certain other signs either were knocked over because of the weather, well, maybe because of the weather. Or, because it rained, and it rained hard. Some signs kind of got pulled up out of the yard. But then some other signs magically appeared that no one who lives in the house agreed to or said was okay. That sounds kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I have heard reports of particularly a lot of renters around here who they see the Anderson signs pop up, and there'll be conversations with the landlord. It's like, I never asked for the sign. And it's like, yeah, well, we're friends with Anderson, so it stays. And it's like, even like kind of saying like, don't put up your own signage. So,
yeah, and I've heard that from other people too. So, if in that case, what I would suggest to everyone who's listening to this, if they are putting up signs that you don't agree with, then put up the sign that you agree with in the yard. Because if they're going to say, well, hey, they're friends of ours, he's friends of ours, so it stays, then you could say, okay, well, it's also my First Amendment right to advocate for who I want. So that's my suggestion about that conversation. Also, David Benak, and Heather, I need another sign because your sign magically disappeared out of my yard.
Somebody yeeted Lawrence's sign, man.
Yeah, they yeeted that bug, and they saw the right, and now it's just gone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we got some finances, we got some campaign finance stuff that I think is very interesting.
Oh yeah, and I'm really glad. I'm glad we get an opportunity to do this because honestly, I mean, here's the thing, like. Money talks and BS walks, and there's been a lot of speeches and talks at like forums and platforms and all that throughout it. But we're big believers in I think like where we differ politically, Lawrence, getting money out of politics and the influence of money in politics is something we fundamentally agree on. And
we do have a newcomer, so I would like to hear your thoughts about money in politics. Since you are a newcomer to the show and you are younger than both of us. So
I think definitely money has absolutely no place in politics, and it's not. I mean, it's just not cool. Like, people shouldn't be using their personal funds to influence what decisions get made and basically holding our politicians for ransom.
Yeah, and, that does happen at the local level, too. And, basically, if y'all want to look these up yourselves, I'm kind of just giving a quick summary of the various candidates. But go look it up, Kalamazoo County's website. Just Google or DuckDuckGo Kalamazoo County Campaign Finance, and you can search for every candidate. Full disclosure, we were not able to look up Benjamin Stanley or Esteban Juarez's campaign finance documents because they were not live on the website yet, but everybody else's were. And let's go from cleanest to dirtiest. Let's do that. So we're gonna give out some gold stars to I believe about 4 people. Let me see if I got this right. So Jacob Andrews, David Benak, Emily Demarest, and some guy named Andy. I don't know.
Yeah, and Andy Argo.
Yeah.
Let's so
some guys.
Yeah. So let's be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be fair and let's be honest.
But yeah, Jacob Andrews did not take a dime of corporate or PAC money. Neither did David Benak or Emily or myself. So all gold stars. I will. One little caveat though, and I'm just gonna say this, like a little asterisk for Emily and David, and this isn't a huge thing, but they both took a donation from somebody in this community who's known as a troll, a harasser, a stalker. I won't say their name because they're probably listening on the show, and now they're furiously looking for some obscure FCC rule to get me kicked off my show.
Oh wow!
So, yeah, y'all know who we're talking about. But
oh wow!
This is somebody who is harassed and stalked personal friends of mine, and. I will cut David a little slack. I don't believe he was his own treasurer for this campaign. It might slip by. I know Emily was their own treasurer though, and you can always refund a donation. And there's a couple other candidates I'm going to be calling out for not refunding some very dubious donations. But
I mean, look. I'm not. I've said it before. Depending on who you get your money from and what you do when it comes to policy says a lot about you. After looking at people's campaign, a lot of y'all platforms, and there's a particular. There is a what's the best word I want to say? There's a reason why I can see why some people took the money that they did, and. Not throwing shade at people. It's just that when we look at policy and strategy, how are we going to implement the best policies to help people? Some people in this community have a much more progressive way of looking at things. Some people have a much more centrist way of looking at things, and it shows in their donations.
That's absolutely true. I wanted to go down. So. I hope I'm not going to break anybody's hearts with these next couple ones. Chris Pradell and Patrice had some things pop up that I thought were kind of red flags. And I'll talk about Chris Pradell first. Let me double check these. Okay. So, Patrice's record actually looks a little bit better, so maybe I'll talk about her first.
Patrice isn't that bad.
No.
It's not bad.
She's got a donation from Compac and a Realtors Pack. The Realtors Pack was about $500. A donation from National Realty for $1,000. And the Compac was $1,500. I think I already said that. Now here's the deal. Something that does worry me is like a couple of the candidates have really substantial donations from realty packs, which when we're talking about an election where affordable housing has been one of the most talked about issues, that makes me just a little bit nervous. At the same time, I've worked with Patrice. I understand her record. The best way I describe it is she takes capitalism and makes lemonade. She's very good at knowing how to work in the system to provide better outcomes for marginalized folks.
Yeah,
it's certainly not a skill I have. So.
Yeah, she's a lot like she's a mix between if we're going to compare her to national figures from the way I've seen her get down, she's a mix between Warren and Bernie on certain issues. There are certain issues where she is a progressive, you cannot deny, and there are certain things that she calls for that seems much more means tested, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it goes back to strategy and policy. If some of the realtor people who are giving her money also are some of the same realtors that were denying mortgages to people, especially black people in our community, and continue systematic redlining in our community, then that could be a problem. But I know that she's been fighting for some housing first initiatives. So when I look at her policy, it does seem like I'm not gonna lie and say it does not seem like it could be a red flag. But at the same time, she hasn't given me any reason to not give her the benefit of a doubt. because when you actually look at some of her policies, she does not give off that the reason give me a cause to give her to not give her benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I hear that. Aya, you have any thoughts on this particular candidate? I guess I should preface with just asking. I know, so you're a reporter for the Herald. Are you like a Kalamazoo resident? Are you voting in the upcoming election?
So yes, I am a Kalamazoo resident, and I do plan on voting in the upcoming election. So I'm really excited. My first time voting. But I've got to say, I'm not super familiar with the city commission candidates, and I am more familiar with the mayoral candidates, definitely.
Well, we will be talking about them more in depth, and I think we'll be talking about the Daves we know, and just there's this old sketch comedy show called Kids in the Hall, and they do this skit. It's called The Daves I Know. Oh god! And it's just funny because like the two most high-profile candidates are like two Daves. So
that is a old school reference. That was before my time.
That was me watching too much Comedy Central in the early '90s. I probably should have been watching Nickelodeon instead.
Dog, are you kidding, dog? When we were growing up, it was Rugrats and South Park. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was Rugrats and South Park all day.
Right. So I guess if we were to rank these folks, city commission wise, that would bring Patrice in at number 4 or so. If we're just going by like the money, again, there's. Are you talking
about how much money people have raised?
No, I'm just saying like by virtue of where the money's coming from. So you have like me, Jacob, Emily, the candidates who didn't take any corporate money whatsoever, and then the rest who. Except, again, we don't know Benjamin because he didn't publish his. But right. So I would say if we're going to rank them, that'd be like number 4. Number 5. I'm going to break some of y'all's hearts here. I'm sorry. But Chris Pradell, he's been getting some corporate money. He's been getting some money from some not so great people.
Okay.
Yeah. So Ron Kitchens, $250, and Ron is deeply involved with Southwest Michigan First. Let me back up a little bit. Compact, that is a political action committee that's really tied into all of the really big business interests here in Kalamazoo and the outlying areas. Southwest Michigan First is the one that is kind of regional. Southwest Michigan First, they were the ones who were instrumental in pushing the Foundation for Excellence and squashing a progressive income tax. As a matter of fact, you go back, it's Southwest Michigan First that basically bullied the city out of even thinking about a progressive income tax.
Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Southwest Michigan First also the same people who wanted to put a stadium downtown?
Yes, they are.
That still pisses me off to this day. And we talked about that story months ago. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, how? We literally went through a polar ice weather event where the city literally shut down, and we had to rely on the Douglas and churches to house people during a time where if you were outside for more than 10 minutes, you could not only get frostbite, you could die.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Instead of putting more money into into infrastructure or putting money into housing or turning the place on Nazareth, even though the nuns didn't want the building anymore, the old health facility, instead of turning that into a non-secular shelter for people who may need some housing, we're tearing that down, and people were advocating for a sports arena in downtown Kalamazoo. Like it's not that Kalamazoo doesn't have money. It's about what we're doing with the money. And who's trying to benefit from it. Like that's the thing that I think when it comes to especially our local election that bothers me the most is it's not just where you're getting your money from, it's what you're gonna do with the money that we have in our city.
Oh yeah. Let me just a couple more Sherry Welsh from Welsh and Associates. That's $100. Mark Schupan from Schupan & Son 300. I included them on the list because they are some movers and shakers here in the city that have a lot of political and economic clout. Also, 1,500 from Compaq, 500, again, the Realtors Pack reappearing, it's $500. Southwest Michigan First donated $750, which, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, dude, and, you know, Chris, if you're listening, you're a nice guy, but you taught almost every single forum we did, he talked about how great the Foundation for Excellence is, and it really makes me wonder. It makes me wonder.
It makes you wonder where his allegiance lies. Is that what you're?
Yeah, just a little bit. Trying to divide the number of forums he said that by $750.
They got dark in the studio. Now. Yeah. Where did all this shade come from?
Yeah,
like,
I will mention the individual we were talking about earlier. He's a lower income guy, but he does the trolling stuff. That also contributed to Chris and Patrice. Not that, you know, again, I give them a little bit more benefit of the doubt because I don't think they know the history of this individual necessarily. But here's the real bombshell. And granted, this is a very small donation, but it speaks volumes. $35 from, drumroll please, Mary Balkema. Oof. All right, so let me ask, listeners at home, like Aya, do you know who Mary Balkema is? What we speak of?
Not entirely, but from what I have heard, it sounds like she is not the most progressive, and then she's very Republican and not really someone you want funding local elections.
Yeah, long story short, because we talked about her on the show before, Mary Balkema, county treasurer. Most politicians in the city and county kind of go on a spectrum between progressive liberal to extremely moderate Republican. Mary's the outlier. She was a Trump delegate. There's a picture of her taking a selfie with Joe Arpaio, and she's got a history of housing discrimination that's very well documented, and a lot of scandals. She's been investigated by the state for like nepotistic practices, and she's used the land bank as a profit-making enterprise for her friends.
I mean, tell us how you really feel, Andy. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And while $35 isn't all that much in the grand scheme of things, I think all in all, Chris raked in about $17,000 or something. Still, to have someone like Mary Balkema voting with her dollars to say, I would like you to be the next city commissioner, that's a pretty, that's concerning, especially when you're talking about, like, you know, some of the more progressive candidates are talking about, you know, doing a people's land bank to basically compete with the county land bank so that we can actually snatch up some of these properties for the people and not just these, you know, property development companies. So a vote of confidence from Mary is not good. No. So that's Chris. I think we will rank him at number 5. And then
okay, so just so everybody understands, this ranking is in no particular order. We are just giving out facts.
Just giving out facts.
We're just giving out facts.
This is based entirely, not on their platforms, not on their plan, just the money, where their money is coming from.
Yeah.
So
now, I mean, because I do want to go through everyone's platform. We're not gonna have time. We're not gonna have time to do it on this show, but we can go through in detail about people's platform.
Again, 2 weeks ago we had Chris Praydale on. I encourage everybody listen to what he had to say. He went really in depth with a lot of really good policy ideas. But again, I think it's critical to understand. In American politics, if you want the best barometer to know what a politician is going to do, is where their mummy is coming from. I'm thinking about Halloween too much.
No, but what you said was real. I mean, we had the Harvard study. What was it? The study years ago that talked about public opinion does not influence public policy. What influences public policy is financial donors. We've seen that study years ago. And it's not like we have not seen it on the local and national stage. We've seen it on the local stage. If we're talking about Ben Harbor and how the Whirlpool has influenced Ben Harbor. If we're talking about how nationally, how certain people voted for the war in Iraq and then their family members cashed in from weapons contracts to the war in Iraq. I'm talking about people like what's that? I cannot think of her name.
I'm sorry.
But there's multiple people who have cashed in on business on systemic corruption, and that's basically what this is. Even if you look at the things that's going on the presidential election, if you're telling me that Ivanka and Jared Kushner has not cashed in when they've made $80 billion while working at the White House from the president's from Trump's name, from Ivanka not getting trade deals in China to her magically getting them because of Daddy Trump, or how the Saudi Arabia paid $300,000 overpaid in Trump's hotels in DC, and then Trump magically gave them a multi-million dollars weapons deal so they can continue a genocide in Yemen, where that's literally breaking the emoluments clause. That's a part of that systemic corruption that we see nationally, and it happens locally as well. You know, like it's not like these are not things that should or not be talked about, but you know, you see it. If you're not paying attention to it, or you're not political junkies like us, then it's not being talked about, because most mainstream media doesn't want to touch systemic corruption with a 10-foot pole, mostly because their advertisers are the same ones paying the candidates.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Thanks for kind of putting that in a nutshell there. You know, I did want to. We've got 2 more city commission candidates, and then we'll talk about the mayor's race. And yeah, sorry, we'll get you more involved in the discussion once we're talking about them.
Perfectly fine.
So I think we'll round out the hour. Gene Hess and Peter Kushner. They are 6th and 7th, respectively. So Gene, she's taking $500 from Dan Jacqua and Charles Jacqua. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're both from Jacqua Realty. Again, man, realtors are putting a lot of money into this election, man. I saw an Elizabeth Upjohn Mason. I'm not sure. I think that might be one of the Upjohns. 200. Don Parfait, owner of Bravo, and basically a big corporate bigwig here around. He's in Forbes magazine. So right. Yeah, $250. RPAC, which is Realtors Pack, $500. So altogether, that's about $1,500 from people involved in realty. And then another $1,500 from Compact, which again is the big business pack here in Kalamazoo. So, yep. And by the way, I want to really be clear. This is not an indictment of anybody's character, but just what we just said. Money influences policy. And then ranked last as far as city commissioners go, we got Pete Kushner. And honestly, if anybody's been following his platform and kind of the way he talks about issues, this really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. He's probably the most vocally pro-business of the candidates I've seen. Hey, I want to say, before I go into his financials, there's one idea of his I really did agree with, and that's building vertically. The idea that we should start building up, taller buildings to deal with, increasing population, because I think we need to make sure we preserve green spaces while also upping our capacity to bring people in. That being said, let's look at who has paid Peter to run. So, got Southwest Michigan first. That's $750. Compact. That's $1,500. And then he had to take the bottom star, because these two names, man. These two names. It just we got Bill Parfait, $1,000, and Barbara Parfait with another $1,000.
Oh man.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
I want to give.
That's corporate Kalamazoo bingo right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I'm not gonna. I can speak on that. We ain't got time because of the other thing that we need to play on the show. If we have more time, I would go into a little bit more detail. But yeah, that's interesting.
So let's take a break and then talk about the mayors. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Is looking. Campus Outreach is looking for. Hang on. College radio can pretty much be summed up in 5 words.
89.1 FM, Radio Evolution.
Dead air. Dead air.
Yeah, that panel.
Yeah.
So we're back. We were just talking about Politicon, but I think that's a bit of a sidestep.
Oh yeah, that's a side.
We got some important local stuff to talk about because it's very imminent news. This is like coming up next week. We just talked about. We went through the commission candidates and basically did our campaign finance countdown, more or less. Donna take some time to talk about the mayors. I talked a little bit about David's financials, just real briefly, but we're gonna go a little bit more in depth. David Anderson's financials, that's gonna be a lot to talk about. So I want to kind of hand it over to my co-hosts here to start the discussion. Basically, we'll start with you, Aya, because we feel like we haven't really given you a chance to dive in. But kind of your thoughts on the candidate field, and we'll kind of break them down individually. But what's your sense of the mayor's race here in Kalamazoo right now?
I think it's going really well so far. I'm going to try not to be super in favor of any candidate because, of course, on the Western Herald's website, you can find we have some one-on-one stories with the candidates to those that responded to us and coverage of the events that they have held on campus. So if you're looking for more information, then you can find that there. But I'm going to try to stay as partisan as I can. But I think it's definitely a good field that we have running right now. I've had the privilege of speaking to Esteban Juarez and then David Benak one-on-one, which has been fantastic. And I know Benak really, his main concern is definitely the environment and bringing in progressive policies to kind of help low-income residents, especially, who are often at kind of like deal with environmental issues firsthand. And then I think that's a really wonderful thing. And then also Juarez, he really specializes in kind of lifting up the youth in our community and low-income residents and people who are often overlooked by big companies who are, like you mentioned before, looking to do things like build arenas and help out other big companies and not necessarily look into building sustainable housing, affordable housing, and fixing the problems that we have in Kalamazoo, like blighted homes and things like that.
So I do have to say, while you're on here now, when we're working for the Herald, yes, you could be bipartisan. You can lean into that neutrality space. But when we're on this show, we have to be objective. Wait,
is she gonna get like fired if we?
No, that's the thing. I don't want her to get fired. So this is what the whole disclaimer that I'm trying to say is: any of your thoughts and opinions on this show is your opinions, and they do not reflect the Herald in any way, shape, or form. So, because my next question was gonna be, with that being said, who you really feeling? And that's me putting you on the spot. You don't gotta answer that. But I'm just saying.
Well, I think especially, when it comes to the Herald, I think reporting is a job that I've been doing it for, I think this is my 4th year. I was a news editor at my old school. I feel like if they definitely taught me anything, it was that when you're a reporter, it never ends. Like, you're on the clock 24/7. Like, people can call you out of nowhere. But I don't think I would pick a side right now.
Right.
But
That's fair.
Yeah, but I think there definitely are a lot of aspects to each candidate, most that are positive and then some that are negative, and it's important to look at all of those.
Oh yeah.
So I want to kind of just bring up, I'm not endorsing anybody for mayor, partially because I can't. As a Socialist Party USA candidate, I cannot endorse a capitalist candidate. That being said, on my personal page, I will tell y'all who I'm voting for before the election, and I'm not just going to not vote for a mayoral candidate. I think that's silly. Let me just say there's 2 Davids, and one of them would be a heck of a lot easier to work with than the other one.
One of these things, one of these Daves is not like the other.
But I will say for now, I guess I will say I endorse Andy Argo for City Commission. He's kind of a doofus, but I like his policy.
Oh, this guy. All right. Well, I mean, I'm not on anybody's campaign, nor have. But I'm not gonna lie. I have my own biasness because I'm friends with you, and I think I am friends with people who's on Emily's campaign. I like Patricia a lot. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to y'all. And I like Jacob. Like those 4. In those 4 people, in my opinion, if the 3 out of those 4 get on the commission, I'm happy. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm not gonna hold y'all up. I'm only messing with David Benak. Like I don't even get wrong, Mr. We interviewed pretty much everybody, but like I like David. I like Warren too. I like even though he's a write-in candidate, I don't like the fact that he's a write-in candidate, and I think a lot of people, that's maybe a bit detrimental to his campaign. But I also like his ideas. I think that he's a real cool person.
Rob Martinez.
Yeah, Mr. Martinez is dope, man. I think he's super fire as well. I just
can't wait to keep working with him.
Yeah, dog. Like for real. Like Mr. Martinez is dope, man. Like I really like him. I think he's really awesome. On my Facebook page, I said David Benak. I'm voting for David Benak, and I'm gonna keep that same energy all day. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. If anybody got a problem with it, I'm happy to debate it. You know what I'm saying? Y'all can find me on my Facebook page. Y'all can find me on the north side. You know what I'm saying? All day.
Yeah. And, Anderson, for his part, the only thing I really see, he's got familiarity and the money to buy lots of yard signs that he just puts in random people's yards. So, so with that, actually, let's talk a little bit about... So we talked about David Benak's finances, squeaky clean, one tiny little exception, but I'm not going to hold that against him too much. But David Anderson, oh boy, and you know what?
No, wait. We have to be objective. What is the one standout that David Benak has that has you bothered on his donation?
Oh well,
we have to be objective.
I mentioned it earlier.
Yeah,
it's a $50 donation from a local troll / harasser / stalker who's probably going to get really mad that I vaguely mentioned them and try to mess with me, complain with me to complain that I'm breaking some FCC rule to get me kicked off.
Okay.
Anyway, they're gonna research my old parking tickets.
Oh,
they
God.
literally did that to a candidate once.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Anyway, sorry. So I want to give a tip of the hat to the WMU College Democrats for basically doing an analysis for me. I mean, they didn't do it for me, obviously, but I think it really speaks to, again, I'm no longer part of the whole trying to shift the Democratic Party to the left paradigm thing, but as I said on my personal page, sharing this, the kids are all right. Y'all's politics are in the right space, and they called out David Anderson's campaign finance documents for what it was. And I've been open. I said, dude, this guy is the representative of the capitalist class. That's not an insult. That's just what it is, and here's the receipts.
Okay, so before we get to the receipts, we're not joking. When I was joking when I said that he's like the Joe Biden of this campaign, and then looking into the receipts, I was like, oh well, no, I was joking, but this is not a joke. That's not a joke. That's real facts.
To be fair, I think David Anderson's a little bit more mentally with it.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, he's. But yeah, let's get to these facts.
All right, so let's read a little bit. The big ones. Southwest Michigan First gave him 1,000. Compact gave him 3,000. That's more money than any other candidate. They gave him, the Compact gave to a couple of the other city commission ones. Realtors PAC popping up again, 1,000. Also, David Anderson received a donation from Mary Balkema and Bronwyn Haltom. Mary Balkema is the Republican Kalamazoo County Treasurer. Again, like we said earlier, she's been investigated by Michigan State Police. Racist housing practices. Likes to take selfies with fascists.
She helps. She is not a joke when we say that she helps reinforce redlining and racist policies when it comes to black home ownership and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like when we talked about black home ownership last week on the show, and how in Kalamazoo the disparity between denial of mortgages or black home ownership, or the fact that there's lead paint. That children that live on the north side and on the south side has higher elevations of lead paint that are just as high as Flint because of lead paint and because of lead service lines in some of the water. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. It's not a punchline. It's real facts that this lady has contributed to that problem, and in some ways, so has Mr. Anderson. So I'm. It's not that I don't like them. It's just that it's not that I don't like them personally. I think that personally they're fine human beings. It's just at the same time, when your policies hit the real world, how are people affected by it? And they're affected by it.
Cause damage. Man.
Yeah, when it hurts people's lives in our community, we have to address it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'll talk about some of these other donors. So. Bronwyn Haltom, the other donor that was mentioned there, she moved back to the district this year after working for Mitch McConnell's re-election campaign and serving in the Trump administration. So David Anderson's got a donation from somebody who used to work for Donald Trump. $500.
And Mitch McConnell.
And Mitch McConnell, yeah.
And the turtle.
Which one of those is worse is up for debate.
The turtle. No. And I would honestly say it's the turtle. Yeah. I would say it's Mitch McConnell. But Donald Trump is an international embarrassment that has put our standing in the world and has put people in our country in irreprehensible harm. So they are equal. From a legislative perspective, I would say the turtle, but from just just world view perspective, it's Trump.
Yeah. $500 from Robert Brown. He's the CEO of Traystar. That's a development company in Kalamazoo. Robert also gave money to Trump, Bronwyn Haltom, and former State Senator Margaret O'Brien. Also, David hosted a fundraiser at the Foundry. It's a little space owned by none other than Traystar. $500 from Frederick Brown. That's the chairman of Traystar. $50 from Megan Bawalda. Megan is the Kalamazoo GOP's Finance Committee chair.
Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Wait. Pause right there. I'm sorry to pull a Sam Cedar. Yeah. But a Democrat running, a person who's running a person who's running as a Democrat in the Democratic Party was taking money from a Republican co-chair in the city.
Yes, and you know what? Let me just read through the whole list because I'm starting to see a pattern. $100 from Joe Cicola, president of Imperial Beverages, also a donor of State Representative Brant Iden and former Governor Brian Kelly. $600 in total from William Becker. William has also given money to the Kalamazoo GOP, Bronwyn Haltom, and former State Senator Margaret O'Brien. Now, I'd say if you were a Republican and you wanted to influence an election in Kalamazoo, well, Kalamazoo's too quote-unquote liberal or progressive to elect a Republican. Well, what do?
You buy a conservative Democrat.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is. You put your money in the same place that conservative Democrats would be. So it does not make sense where we could be a beacon of what it means to be a city, to be a progressive city, to be innovative in this city, and we have Democrats who are being funded by Republicans. Like, come on, son. Come on, son. You gotta get out of here with that garbage, man.
Yeah, man. And just rounding it out, $10.50. That's the maximum donation from William Johnston and Rhonda Stryker. And those are the Kalamazoo families, man. That's like those are two of like the five families that run the city. And then just a couple other ones. $100 from Nancy Trough. Nancy's a landlord that's responsible for countless properties throughout Kalamazoo. You don't say. Were we talking about something like this earlier? And then $500 from James Felch. James is the CEO of a development group called CSM Management. Oh, man. Oof. Oh, this just... oh, man. So here's the big thing. We're passionate about this kind of stuff on the show. To us, this is like a red flag. It's a complete non-starter. There's a lot of people in the city who don't know. Just David Anderson. He's a familiar name. He's been on the commission for X number of years. A lot of people are going to vote for him just for that reason. So if this makes you see red, tell all your more casual friends who maybe don't follow politics this closely, tell them the truth. Tell them what it is. Because, again, like, there's a lot of people that, and like, we talked about this before too, Lawrence. Like people on the north side in the Edison neighborhood who voted for Fred Upton just because he's the incumbent. Like we got to educate our communities, y'all, because we can't let these people who are taking money from the people destroying our communities. We can't let those kind of people get into power.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. When it comes to issues like this, I think it's important to look at especially how national politics reflects on the local level. Like, Democrats have been forced to compromise with more conservative Republicans for years. And then you really have to look at how the Democratic Party has shifted to essentially become Republican adjacent. And then so when you're looking at candidates, you have to look and see, and actions speak louder than words, like who is funding them, like who are they going to be listening to. And then I think it seems like it's pretty clear who David Anderson is going to be listening to. And then you have to just look at that and you have to make a decision for yourself. Like, are you going to pick someone who's going to prioritize the little guy who can't afford to pay $3,000 to a candidate so they'll do what they want them to do? Or are you going to vote for the big guy who's going to side with people who can pay for what they want to get done in the city?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we've, like we said, these are all the facts. We wanted to make sure to give you as much information before this local election as possible. I think we've done that. And I just want to re-emphasize the candidates who got the Gold Star. So, the Gold Star candidates who have completely clean records when it comes to campaign finance. We're talking about mayoral candidate David Benek. We're talking about city commission candidates Jacob Andrews, Emily Demarest, and there's some guy named Andy. With the caveat that Emily and David took a small amount of money from a problematic individual, but that's it. So if big money is something that you think about, those are the candidates you should probably look at.
Yeah, pretty much. The only other person that I would add an exception to that rule is Patrice.
Oh,
yes. That's the only person. That's the only other person that I would say. Like if we're not giving her a gold star, she definitely deserves silver. Like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
That's the best way to put it. They get the gold, Patrice gets the silver, and then everybody else. I don't know. They get ribbons. They got people they can get a trophy from. All right?
They got ribbons.
Yeah,
they got.
We ain't got no money for trophies. Go ask Compact for a trophy.
Right, you know what I'm saying? If I was doing this for me, I have this is we ain't got no trophies. You know what I'm saying? They ain't got no awards for that. Trophies. You know what I'm saying? But I do have something that I did yesterday that I want to play for the show.
And this is kind of a big deal, guys.
It's not a big deal.
How did you score this? We didn't talk about this.
Okay, so basically, the man who wrote the memo back in 2006 that was released in 2009 about domestic terrorism, Daryl Johnston, was in Kalamazoo. The Lewis Walker Institute was bringing him in to talk about domestic terrorism, not just as a single lone gunman or a single lone terrorist, but as a whole, and how they've permeated not just our culture when it comes to people who are incels or things of that nature, but also how they got into our local police department and military. He wrote this memo during the Bush administration back in 2006, and because back in 2006, 2007, when he was working for Homeland Security at the time, because he was working for the government during the Clinton administration as well, and during the other Bush administration, they were getting information that a black candidate named a black senator from Chicago named Barack Hussein Obama may be running, and we need to get some intel. We need to get some intel on how right-wing militia groups and things of that nature are going to react. And so he was one of the head data analysts. So he and his team was like, all right, let's put together some numbers. Let's see how this works. This was during the Bush administration. It comes out during the Obama administration, and
Fox News didn't like it very much.
Oh, no.
There's a great book called Alt America, and it really goes deep into the story of how this played out.
And again, he's a registered Republican at this time. He was a third-generation Republican, been voting Republican for the overwhelming majority of his life, and we talk about it during the interview, so I'm kind of burying a lead a little bit. But during the interview, and he explains this during the interview, and he's like, Doc, I'm getting lambasted and my team's being smeared by a report that we created that told the truth. And because President Obama didn't, and this is one of the things that I had a problem with when it came to Obama administration, they conceded to Republican talking points. They downplayed their role and basically obliterated their team. Their team went from their team and people who were working with them went from like 25 to 1. You know what I'm saying? Working and everybody else was going on to other things. Because we have all this money going to Islamic terrorism or all these other threats that are outside this country, but we're not talking about the ones that are actually in the country. The nutcases who we arm. So we talked about that conversation. We talked about we talked about the false equivalence between left-wing terrorism and right-wing terrorism. It was a very long conversation, and we're gonna play. If you want, we can play the majority of the conversation.
I think we have time.
It's a 28. Yeah, it's like a 27-minute conversation. And after the break, I will play that. He now runs a consulting firm, DTL Analytics, and he still does. And he still advocates for this because he has his own consulting firm. He does not have to do the work that he's doing now, which is going to college campuses, going to other places, and still talking about, domestic terrorism and right-wing terrorism is a threat. Far right-wing is an issue. So we had a really insightful conversation, and I end up being able to interview him. Mostly because some of the people who work at the Lewis Walker Institute knows that I do some filming and editing. Also knows about this show, and knows about some of the other stuff that I do. And I was reached out to, and they asked me, hey, would you want to interview him? And I was like, sure. The dude's been on Democracy Now! He's been on the Young Turks. He's been on the Real News Network. You know what I'm saying? Like, the dude's been on MSNBC, CNN. He hasn't been on Fox News, but he has been on like everything else, basically talking about this basically telling the truth, and he got lambasted for it, and it affected his life. It affected his life, off the record. We talked about how it affected his life personally. We talked about how some of the people in the ATF and the FBI came after him and his team, which is a real thing, dog. Like, and how inter-bureau self-grandizement was taking away from actually protecting the American citizens, and that was a whole nother conversation. But yeah, dog, we're gonna play that conversation right after we take this break.
You know what? Actually, there is one other thing I wanted to talk about, and we've got just a couple of minutes here, and
no. There is something that I do want to talk about before we go to this break.
I wanted to kind of just a three-way conversation, and let's only take a couple minutes with this. But one of Chuck D is going to be awarded with the 2019 Woody Guthrie Prize, and I wanted to have, because I knew we were going to be talking about some heavy conversation topics in this, and I wanted to talk about something a little bit different. So, for me personally, thinking about, Chuck D's getting this prize. I got a Public Enemy tattoo on my chest. It's it's real. But I think it speaks to a lot of people from like the kind of places where we grew up. You don't necessarily start your political education by reading like Huey P. Newton or Karl Marx or any of that stuff. You learn about like criticisms of the United States and our politics and our society through hip hop. And I was just curious, like, and I'm like, maybe like trying to just roundtable it, like, what was like, a hip hop art, because I just said, Public Enemy was like my big gateway drug into this. I'd say also maybe like Immortal Technique helped me understand.
Yeah, dog.
But what was like a political hip hop group that really kind of opened your eyes and, got you thinking about this stuff in a different way?
Well, hip hop has always been, as someone who's been teaching hip-hop since 2006, hip-hop as a culture has always been anti-establishment, and it's always been a way for people who's been disenfranchised to push back against those who are benefiting from it. Just like blues, jazz, and gospel, reggae, and all others that came before it. It was a rebellion against the system coming from a place of those that were oppressed, and having the courage to speak truth to power. Public Enemy, Run DMC, even NWA. People, for me personally, you had people like Common, Talib Kweli, Mos Def, even in others, and even others, like, because we're talking about Michigan, you got people like M and Royce the 5'9" and Black Milk, and me personally, I personally love Tech 9. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Wu-Tang Clan, Outkast, personally. Like these were people who influenced a lot of the way I thought about hip hop. People like Lupe Fiasco, and who would talk about not just Kanye when he wasn't crazy. We're talking about everything from Graduate. We're talking about. I will even give Dark Twisted Fantasy. So we're talking about New Slaves. So everything before New Slaves. You know what I'm saying? Like everything before Dark Twisted Fantasy. For me, when it comes to the culture of hip hop, understanding that it started with the DJ, then the dance, then the written word, which is graffiti, then you had the MC that came in last in the house of hip hop, and then you have history. We can't know where we're going if we don't know where we're coming from. You know what I'm saying? And understanding that all those elements exist, and all those elements are there to help give voice to those that are the voiceless. So for me, hip hop was an expansion. In my view, hip hop was another expansion upon the Black liberation movements that came before it, and it was another way to express that in an artistic way. Because for those who do not know the story, and I'm giving a quick summary. Late 60s, early 70s, after with all the social unrest, with the Black liberation movement, the Puerto Rican national movement, poor white people movement, the civil rights movement, and all these things, and also the gang wars that were going on in New York City at the time, people like Grandmaster Flash and people like Curtis Blow and others came together to throw park jams, and they stole public electricity, and they went downtown to New York, and they stole public electricity and threw park jams to not only stop the violence, but to bring unity and creativity to create a space for unity, for peace, love, unity, and having fun, which are the 4 principles of hip-hop. If you don't know that, then you don't know hip-hop. The 4 principles back in the day from African Bambaataa and others talked about was peace, love, unity, and having fun. The 5 elements of hip-hop was the things I talked about before, which was the DJ, the MC, the written word, which is graffiti, the dance, and history.
Anybody wants a really good dive in on this topic, Jeff Chang's Can't Stop, Won't Stop is still one of the best comprehensive histories on hip-hop. You have Rumble Kings, Hip Hop Evolution, which is still on Netflix. Even things like what was it? The series that Grandmaster Flash was a part of, The Breakdown, which was a decent series and a way of looking at hip hop. So the reason why I think not just him, I mean Dave Chappelle also got an award. He got the Tom Sawyer Award, and Richard Roundtree. We have to say rest in peace to one of my favorite comedians of all time. I just wanted to say that Pops, for those who don't know, Pops from the Wayans brothers, or y'all might have remembered him as Grandpa from the Boondocks. He passed away at the age of 77. We have to say RIP to him, and RIP to John Conyers, who also passed away. We didn't get a chance to say that. We need to pay it past HR 40. We need reparations. We need past that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, Chuck D, awesome, and I'm glad he's getting this award. There's more hip hop artists that deserve that award as well, that are revolutionaries in our culture, and he's not the only one. And also female MCs as well, and female artists as well. And I can't forget that. I want to make sure that we get to. Okay, so basically, kind of just same question. How has music, especially could be hip hop, could be something broader too. How has that kind of influenced your kind of the way you think about politics and that kind of stuff?
Okay, well, as the resident young person in the room, I don't think music has influenced how I think about politics or important social issues at all. When it comes to the music that I see played now, I feel like politics isn't as strong. And then when I think about somebody that really had a political influence, the first name that comes to mind is Kendrick Lamar. And even when I think about Kendrick Lamar, I think his name, and I'm like, he's not one of the people that's super talked about now. Like, he's one of the older figures, like one of the father figures of hip-hop to people my age, I would say. And
like Cole, like J. Cole too.
Yeah, and like when you think about groups like NWA, like those are grandfathers that are rarely ever talked about. And I feel like what ends up taking the mainstream is people like Post Malone, like how he said, I think it was a year ago, when he said that he was essentially saying like hip-hop isn't really a strong genre, like it's just talking about like what you normally hear about, like objectifying women and drugs and partying and stuff like that. And I feel like it's really sad how music especially has shied away from important topics like that. Like you just saw, I think it was NF, his album The Search beat out Chance the Rapper for #1 on the Billboard 200 charts. And then that was no shade to NF. I think I was listening to him today. He's not bad. He's talking about mental health, which is great. We need that too. But I think it just speaks to how people are, as hip-hop becomes really mainstream. And then I think I just read today that hip-hop is like the most mainstream music genre.
It's the number one. It's the number one music genre in the world. And also, it was John Witherspoon that I was talking about, who passed away. I'm sorry. It wasn't Richard Roundtree. That's a different person. Sorry.
Yeah, but like as it becomes this genre that's mainstream and takes up the most attention, you'll have people like NF and Cardi B who are going to come in and they're going to appeal to what people want to listen to, and that's not necessarily political issues and things that are really important that need to be talked about, which is, I think, from my perspective, really disappointing.
But Cardi's political attributes, talking about politics, and the fact that she supports Bernie Sanders says a lot. And also people like Killer Mike, who also is a rapper that doesn't necessarily talk about news and doesn't talk about politics that much, except his song about Ronald Reagan, which is awesome.
Oh man.
Yeah. If you have not heard about Run the Jewels, you're missing some good stuff.
They got some,
like
close your eyes and count
Kill Your Masters.
Kill Your Masters. Don't get captured. Lie, cheat, steal, kill, win. Everybody doing it.
Yeah. Right. But also, but one not to cut. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, it was John Witherspoon who passed away, and I messed up. I didn't mean to say Richard Roundtree. Now my black card's gonna get revoked. But no. But it was John Witherspoon. John Witherspoon. If you're talking about people who are influences, go back and watch the roast of Richard Pryor on YouTube. It's John Witherspoon, Paul Mooney. It's Paul Mooney, John Witherspoon, Robin Williams, and a whole slew of comedians that are legends, who are godfathers, and in the way that we help shape our civil discourse, and just help shape America itself. And that was a tragedy that I wanted to speak on, and that he passed away too soon, man.
All right. Well, I'm thinking if we want to get to this interview, we should probably do that. So
yeah.
I want to really thank you for coming on the show. I think next time we get a little bit more prep time. Also, next week will be the first show after the election, so I can probably do a little bit more to prep myself. Yeah, get a chance to take a nap or something.
Oh man. So no, let's get straight to this interview. I have it right here on my phone.
Right.
I got it.
So we're gonna plug this in. And
Yeah.
There it is.
Oh, what's the plug?
There it is. Okay.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
I'm gonna cut it down because of time restraints. I'm gonna cut it down. Hold on a second.
Somebody got this all tangled up. I don't know who was in the studio before.
All right, all the way up.
Hold on.
All the way up.
Didn't I just say that? I said, Mr. Gunn, your phone.
Okay. This is an interview at the Lewis Walker Institute with Daryl Johnston. He is a acclaimed author and former data analyst under the President Bush and under President Obama. This man helped write and establish the memo about right-wing domestic terrorism, and its impact in our community and in our country. And he's taken some time out of his busy schedule to discuss some of those topics and others with us today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lawrence.
All right. So, can you tell us a bit more about not just your two acclaimed books, Right Wing Resurgence and Hate Land, but about some of a little bit about your history, about the memo, about how you came about writing it, and the aftermath of you writing it.
Okay. So we're going to get into all the drama.
We're going to get right into it.
Yeah, so as Lawrence said, back in 2009, I wrote a intelligence assessment called Right Wing Extremism, and talked about how the political and economic climate would fuel the rise of white nationalism as well as anti-government groups. And so the project actually began about a year and a half earlier with a call from the Capitol Police in 2007, who tipped us off that Senator Barack Obama from Illinois was going to announce his run for president of the United States. They wanted us to monitor the white supremacist message boards and websites to see if any threats would emerge against this African American senator. So we did that for about a month or so, and there wasn't any initial threats when he announced his candidacy. It was only when he won the Democratic nomination that all of a sudden the threats started rolling in, and there was actually a couple of assassination plots.
Yeah.
So anyway, we waited until the results of the 2008 election to put together this report, but we collected information, over the year and a half, and basically it was a warning to law enforcement that we were going to see a shift in the threat environment, because since 9/11, most of law enforcement's resources as far as countering terrorism was focused on, Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. So we were going to send this report out to warn law enforcement and policymakers that, hey, you're going to have resources devoted to these, white supremacists and white nationalists that were radicalizing in the country.
So after, and as the story goes, after the memo, the report got leaked, that's when right-wing media and a lot of very loud and establishment figures started to mischaracterize your report, where you were just giving out numbers and facts. You were just giving out data and facts. Can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of what happened after the report?
Sure. So the report was disseminated to law enforcement on early April 2009, and within a few days of it being released, all of a sudden it was leaked to a radio shock jock out in California named Roger Hedgecock, who was really hyping on the immigration issue and things like that, and kind of had an axe to grind against the Department of Homeland Security. So he's credited for bringing this report to public light. Now, something that your audience needs to know is at the time that I wrote this report, I was actually a registered Republican and conservative myself. And so here my report was being mischaracterized in the conservative news as being this hit job against conservatives and calling this threat out. And they objected to the term right wing. They felt that applied to all conservatives. Didn't say anything about the word extremism. But also
they like the extremism part.
Well, maybe. But anyways, they were upset about a definition we had buried in a footnote that tried to show the wide range of groups that fall under this umbrella of right-wing extremism. And basically they're put into two bins. You've got hate groups like neo-Nazis and KKK and racist skinheads, people like that. And then you have the anti-government faction, which is primarily the paramilitary groups like militias and sovereign citizens who don't want to be citizens of the United States anymore. So that was the reason why the definition was vague, and we thought by having it in a footnote that people would put it into the context of what the report was about, and that was violent extremism and terrorism. But they didn't. They extrapolated the thing out of the footnote and talked about it arbitrarily to make it sound like we were spying on conservatives and demonizing Republicans, basically.
Yeah.
And so I found that just really enlightening because I, as a Republican conservative, wrote this report, talked about this threat within our ranks, but yet our own Republican leadership just remains silent about it.
I mean, so that was back, so that was 2006, 2007. The report came out, so that was during the Bush administration where the report first started. We started extrapolating the data, and the report started to come together. It's released in 2009 under the Obama administration, where it's mischaracterized by the media. From 2006 to today, where we've seen the Oath Keepers, which is one of the people in Sovereign Citizens, work with police officers to detain migrants, or when the ACLU came over the report earlier this year, talking about all of the domestic terrorism that happened in 2008 came from right-wing extremists. The question I'm trying to get to is it shows that your report's justified, yet it's still not taken seriously or still not looked at in a productive manner. So what's something that we could do to help, the public can do to help?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the critical message of the report, which was showing this change in threat environment, hoping that policymakers and police superintendents would shift resources to try to get ahead of this threat, this message got lost in the political firestorm that ensued. And the thing that was interesting is when I went back and looked at all the media reporting about the leak and what the report was about, I thought all the media organizations were mischaracterizing this report. I found out no, that most of the media gave a very objective report on the findings of this assessment, and it was only Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and Pat Robertson and all these conservative news networks that were the ones that were spinning it for political purposes. Now you got to remember, the Republicans came off some really tough losses in 2008. They not only lost the presidency, but they lost congressional seats and people in the Senate. And so they were looking for, I think, a weapon to use against this new administration. And unfortunately, the Department of Homeland Security was caught off guard when this conservative attack began, and they weren't prepared for it, and they basically caved to all the political pressure.
That is, it's funny that the truth is controversial.
Looking back on this report, I don't get any satisfaction in knowing that I was right. I was just doing my job as a trained senior intelligence specialist with, at the time I wrote that report, probably I would say 15 plus years of experience looking at this issue. I was just doing my job. I called out the threat for what it was, and unfortunately, that assessment proved to be true, and we're less prepared now because of the politicalization that happened, created a chilling effect in both the law enforcement and intelligence communities, that if you write about this subject, people are going to object to it, they're going to raise hell, and they're going to cause difficulties in your work space.
Well, speaking of law enforcement, we spoke to the police academy here in Kalamazoo, and you also did a report with Reuters that is still online today, and I encourage everyone to go and read it, about how law enforcement and how branches of the military can be infiltrated by far right-wing extremist groups, and what we can do to combat that. I was wondering if you could go into any detail about that for some people who may not have seen or read it.
Sure. So the news report he's referring to was done by Reveal News. I worked with Reuters on a different subject that showed the disparity between sentencing of Muslim extremists versus white extremists.
Oh, my bad. I
no problem. But anyways, Reveal News worked on a story with me involving a group of extremists called 3%ers. Okay. So in this latest wave of extremism that's gripped the country since 2008, we've had a couple of new movements that have emerged. The Oath Keepers and the 3%ers. Both of these are anti-government type groups. The Oath Keepers are primarily looking to oust perceived corrupt officials, change the government, things like that, where the 3%ers are more of a paramilitary type group. They're into survivalism and things like that.
You referred to the Oath Keepers. They were the ones that went to Ferguson that was armed with the bulletproof vest when the whole thing that happened with Ferguson.
Right. So what happens is you have militia members that join the Oath Keepers, and that's where you get a lot of the military weaponry and the dress and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the same people we're talking about.
Okay.
So before all of these new movements emerged, we were primarily interested in white supremacists infiltrating law enforcement. That was like the big emphasis, to try to be aware that there are sympathizers and even members of KKK and neo-Nazi groups within police forces across the country. So from my experience working for a federal law enforcement agency, ATF, we were cognizant of that, and so we applied what's called operational security, which means you keep the investigation and its operational plans and everything close to the vest. You don't share that with the state and locals for fear that there may be a sympathizer who could tip off the extremists of the impending raid and arrest. So we were always cognizant of that. We learned from the history back in the 60s, and how so many small town police departments had KKK members that went out and lynched people.
Yeah.
And the FBI had to be called in, and the federal government and Justice Department to investigate those incidents. But these new movements, the Oath Keepers and 3%ers, pose a very unique, new type of threat. We're not talking about people that are going to shoot up the police station, but these are people within the police force who have sworn an allegiance to an organization that goes contrary to their department's oath. Mm-hmm. And so you have this conflict on who are you going to serve and obey when it comes to one of your members being investigated. So they pose what's called an operational security threat as well as a counterintelligence threat. They could be passing information to the militias about how the police station, where the surveillance cameras are, what type of badging equipment they have, where the armory is, where the evidence locker is. So I would encourage all police departments to take a second look at 3%ers that are among your department, as well as Oath Keepers, and look at it from a counterintelligence, insider, OPSEC threat.
That's interesting to me, because if you're an organization that says you're anti-government, yet you are being a police officer, which works for the government, you're counterintuitive to the goal of your organization. On top of the fact that you're getting paid by the taxpayers that you're supposed to be serving and protecting.
Yeah, well, nobody says that these extremist beliefs are rational and make sense, right? We found that the case for a lot of extremists that commit violent acts. They get Social Security. They depend on the government for their retirement, things like that. So some of these extremists, they're willing to work for the government, but I think they put on from the perspective of, well, I'm doing this as an insider, for my organization to help them out.
Okay, well, speaking, I wanted to ask about, we talked about media perception earlier in this conversation, and you'll hear a lot, especially from the right wing, about groups like Black Lives Matter or Antifa, or earlier this year we had we had the Justice Department come up with Black Identity Extremism. Is from working in the data field, isn't there a false equivalence between the far left wing extremism and far right wing extremism?
Yes, so both of these are extremists. However, there's different tactics that are being employed. And so today, the right-wing extremists actually have been killing people. have been burning down, places of worship, things like that. So to try to equate Antifa, which is primarily into property destruction, and they're anti-law enforcement. They throw rocks at the police. They pelt the police with, milkshakes and urine and feces and ball bearings sometimes, which could be concerning. There's really no comparison right now in today's threat environment between the far left and its level of violence versus the far right. The far right far exceeds the threat from the far left at this point in time. We did have a little micro trend back in 2016 and 17 where we had some police ambushes that were linked back to black nationalists who were avenging the deaths, their comrades or their brothers who were gunned down by the police unfairly and unjustly. But that was a micro trend. And it was an isolated, half dozen incidents, and we haven't seen that manifest itself year after year after year like we've seen with the white nationalist threat.
Okay. So when it comes to white nationalist threat, especially when it comes to our law enforcement or military, and when it comes to the question that I'm trying to get to is how can the civilian population, how can we better analyze and or assess these threats for our own security if we feel that some police officers are a part of these groups? Like what's a step that we can take to help protect our community?
Well, one thing that citizens can do is if you see something, say something. All right, so all of us are on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, Twitter. If you see something, if you see a police officer in uniform flashing a 3%er tattoo on their Facebook page, or you see somebody, wearing a badge that's attending, some sort of, racist rally against immigrants, report that to the FBI. So that you can do it anonymously through just taking screenshots and sending it in anonymously. Turn it into the media. Let them become aware that these people exist and what their names are, and call them out. Make them be held accountable. Citizens can organize watch groups if you've got an extremist presence in your community, to work with the police and work with the media and work with national level civil rights organizations like the ADL and SPLC to develop a strategy to counter message these extremists, to kind of put them on notice that you're aware of their activities. Because when we sit in silence and let these groups do their recruiting and their radicalizing without bringing it to public light, it becomes an increasing danger that one of these people may resort to violence at some point.
All right, well, we've got just a couple minutes left. I want to go around and, talk. Lawrence, just kind of some wrap-up comments about, by the way, that was a really good interview, and as Lawrence said, we will be putting the full version up on our page.
There's like 7 minutes left.
Yep. But I was wondering, do you have any thoughts?
On domestic terrorism?
No, on the or on the show, or just your experience on to your first time being on the show.
Oh, well,
all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It was really wonderful. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think the fact that Western has radio programs that advocate for different sides and definitely bring this progressive voice and try to include younger voices as well as older voices is really essential. And I think it's especially important now that we have the local elections, and when you have to domestic terrorism specifically, definitely a rise and a spike in it, and then people just calling truth to power when it comes to issues like that. So I really appreciate what you all are doing, and thank you for letting me come in here and speak to you.
Please come.
Thank you.
Whenever you would like, come on down and drop some of that knowledge and analysis. Thanks again for bringing your wisdom to the show. Lawrence, any other comments to wrap up that interview you did, or just maybe some thoughts on the election if you have them?
Doc, the election is next week. Go out and vote. You cannot complain about the government, or you cannot complain about what's going on in your city if you do not participate in it, and you do not participate in just a simple act of voting. But it does not end there. We must continue to advocate for what we believe in afterwards. So yes, voting is the first step, and then making sure that we continue after that to advocate for what we want is how we get systemic change. The rest of this interview will be going up on the conversation on our page. And yeah, man, tune in next week to see for us to talk about some more craziness.
All right. First of all, don't yeet people's yard signs. God, man.
Oh yeah, Doc, I wasn't trying to bring that up again, but Doc, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm still salty about that. How you gonna yeet my yard sign, Doc?
It's like, Mr. Anderson, I don't know if it's like you or one of your people, but somebody did it. So
look, I cannot. Full disclosure, I cannot definitively say that it was Mr. Anderson, but I do find it very strange that we did not have any Mr. Anderson signs in our yard, when I came home from work. But I find it particularly odd that the other person that's running for mayor's yard sign was gone. But when I woke up, it was there, yeah. and two more signs, not just one, but two signs was in our yard when I woke up.
You know, I guess when it comes to the mayor's race, and particularly people named David, there could only be one. Anyway,
when did we Highlander this? Like what?
Okay. Also, that was a great conversation. I can't wait to listen to the full thing. Yeah. And just for the election, everybody, y'all, I'm not going to speak as like a candidate. I'm just going to speak as an organizer. It's one of the most important elections we've had in a really long time. 3 open seats for commission.
Real talk.
New mayor. This is going to determine the future of Kalamazoo for decades to come. And really, there's like like I say, the next 10 years it's gonna be like a turning point in the history of the human race. I mean, we're serious. We're facing some crisis here. So let me just ask you this: who do you want to be the pilots at the helm up in City Hall when we're talking about climate crisis and the resurgence of fascism and the breakdown of capitalism and all that stuff? Just think long and hard about who is gonna be up to the plate, up to the challenge for all of that stuff. Because it's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next Tuesday, vote. Also, you can vote absentee down at City Hall anytime you want at your convenience. So, with that, we're going to close out the show. Thank y'all for listening. Again, this has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.